Hello, I'm Kyle J. Britt.
And I'm Michael Kinstlinger.
From Havas Helia, you're listening to Data Defeats Truman, an honest, nonpartisan investigation into what presidential candidates send out via email and social media, and how much impact it has.
So today, Kyle, is our South by Southwest podcast and wrap up. So firstly, wanted to welcome all the first-time listeners. Maybe you heard about us or saw us at South by Southwest. So welcome aboard. We hope you enjoy it.
Absolutely, we're glad you're here. A lot of you started listening with our Super Tuesday special edition. This is also kind of a special edition of the podcast with our entire presentation from South by Southwest. If you want to go back and listen to our two previous full-length episodes, they are episode 1 and 2. There will be another one coming on the economy and another one coming on new media in the coming weeks. Now take a listen and enjoy our presentation from South by Southwest.
So, hi everybody, we're going to get started. Firstly, wanted to thank all of you for coming out to our session this morning. I know that there are a lot of other events going on, and we are honored and humbled that you chose to hear us talk. This is Data Defeats Truman, how CRM will elect a president. I know for most of us, it's pretty early in the morning. For some of you, potentially, you haven't yet gone to sleep. So for those of you, thank you for ending your night with us.
So if you want to follow along with us on Twitter, we are at Data Defeats on Twitter and Snapchat. We have a lovely assistant in the front row who will be live tweeting our entire presentation. So you want to retweet something, you want to retweet some of the facts we've got, they'll be coming through on Twitter as well. So you can follow us there. Yep.
So I want to ask a question quickly, show of hands. How many of you are following one particular candidate either via email or social? Okay, all right. How many people are following more than one particular candidate? Okay, all right. Well, I think we've got you beat. So the question we start with is, why is email and social media so important? So there's Mr. Nixon up there talking. Since 1968, 10 of the 12 presidential elections have been won by the candidate who spent the most money. Think of that. Think about that. You know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You get the money, you can do more with it. And a lot of people are complaining, get the money out of politics. It's kind of the backbone of what Bernie Sanders is talking about. Hillary talks about it, you know, campaign finance reform, Citizens United. It's a big deal. People don't want to think that their candidates are bought and sold by corporations or the Koch brothers or George Soros or whatever. But the only people who don't talk about this, it seems, are the winners. Those are the ones that like the money coming in. It enables them to do certain things, enables them to hire the best people, make the best advertising. So with the ascent of digital media, it's really allowed candidates access to voters that they would never had before. You know, previously it was, you know, big television commercials or ads in the New York Times. But now with email and social, it's allowing a kind of personal contact that they can use to their best. You know, if you're collecting emails from people, getting social, you can send out requests for money. All you have to do to donate $1, you know, $3, up to $2,700 is click on a link in an email or follow where a social media post takes you. So it's really changing the landscape, and it's very important. So quick thing, I've got 2 phone chargers here. I'm curious, anybody have, we're going to give them out. Anybody have an idea who the 2 candidates were that outspent their competitor and lost? There's a connection between the 2. Yes? Nope, not Mitt Romney. Yes? Nope. Anybody else? What's that? What do you say? Nope. Yeah.
So these are losers that outspend.
Yeah, losers that outspend. Yeah. Anybody?
Ford is right. Ford is right. The first one.
So you get
Come
one.
on up.
We'll give you one afterwards. Come up, we'll give you it afterwards. And the other one is, there's a connection to Ford that this other gentleman has. Anybody idea what it is? Nope. Close. Yes. Nope. Yeah, next. So it was actually Bob Dole in 1986. Bob Dole outspent Clinton and lost. So Bob Dole has the unfortunate reputation of being part of the 2 campaigns that spent more money and lost. So kind of unfair for him, I suppose.
So although it may not be surprising to hear that 10 of the 12 campaigns that won spent the most money, what you may be surprised to learn is that in 2008 and 2012, President Obama collected more than 50% of his individual campaign contributions through email directly. So more than 50% came directly attributable through his email channel. And so we know social media is rising now, but still email is something to contend with. Another thing to notice is that in 2012, President Obama received 60 million votes in the general election, won the popular vote with 60 million votes. In his email database on election day, he had 30 million email addresses. And now every one of those email addresses probably didn't equal an exact vote, but it's very clear to be able to see that President Obama was able to reach out to a large portion of his supporters at any time he wanted. He was able to circumvent the media, and he did. I don't know if any of you remember, in 2008 when he announced Joe Biden as his running mate, he did that via text message and email before the press got notice of it. So he was able to use the power of email and the power of direct customer relationship management or voter relationship management to connect to his audience. So the question is, if money is important to winning an election, which it is email and social important? If they're driving the money, one would think so. So Americans will receive as many as 10 billion emails between now and Election Day on November 8th. To each one of you, if you add up every one, 10 billion emails. So the campaigns know it's important. They're doing it. And that means it also should be important to us because we can look at those emails. We can learn about our candidates. We can learn more about them, what kind of leader they might be, how they handle trouble, how they handle backlash, how they handle crises, all through their emails and their social platform.
Or how they don't handle it.
Yeah. And so we had a hypothesis, and the hypothesis boils down to more emails, more retweets, more money, more votes. But in more layman's terms, it is what these candidates say over social media and email matters. The question was, how much? Could we actually find out how much that mattered? So we set out to learn as much as we could about every candidate through email and social media.
Yep. So I'm going to take a step back here. I'd like to introduce to my right, Kyle J. Britt. Kyle is a senior digital strategist at Havas Helia, and one of Kyle's claim to fame is that he created one of the top 10% funded Kickstarter projects of all time.
Cool. And to my left is Michael. Michael Kinstlinger is our email marketing manager, so we both work at Havas Helia. Michael likes Ben & Jerry's more than me, which is a challenge. He runs a blog since 2012. He's tried over 150 flavors, which puts him in a class that might just include him, Ben, and Jerry.
Exactly.
So.
And maybe Bernie Sanders.
Okay. So you can also follow us both on Twitter, Kyle J. Britt and Kinstlinger up there.
So when we thought about how to do this, Kyle and I work very heavily in CRM, customer relationship management, customer relationship marketing, basically taking data about a person or an organization or whatever, and using that to market to that person. The more you know about them, their geography, demographic information, sales history, what they like, the better you can tailor a message to them. So what we did is we thought, okay, let's set up some email addresses and see how the different candidates are emailing to these different people. So we literally created, if you look at all the states that are colored in, about 20 plus email addresses, and more are actually coming. Just to, we try to get strategic in terms of blue states, red states, swing states, the state, and choosing zip codes, some that were more urban, some that were more rural. When you sign up for emails from a candidate, some of you might know, you're asked for your email address, obviously, first name, your zip code, that's it. That's the information they need. First name, they can start personalizing some messages to you. By zip code, they can tell where you live. If they're smart, they can tailor the message to you, because even with that limited information, there's a lot you can do. We choose Gmail to do this for reasons that I'll discuss in a little while. We also chose first names. Some of them were obviously male, some of them that were obviously female, and some of them were a little bit androgynous. We wanted to see how creative some of the marketing teams were going to be with their email and social campaigns.
So this all started back in July. I got targeted on Facebook for an ad that said, hey, do you want to enter to win dinner with Hillary Clinton? And I don't know if I'm particularly a Hillary supporter or a detractor, but I figure if you're offered a chance to have dinner with a presidential candidate, you take it. So I signed up. The marketer in me knew that was a ploy to get to my email address. There was no other purpose to that. And sure enough, I got an email a few minutes later that said, you are entered to win, congratulations, would you like to donate $1 to Hillary? Clever marketing. And the next day I got an email that said, sorry, you didn't win. And over the next couple days, a few more donation emails, and this email, which looked like an open table, like reservation, to say, would you like to enter for another chance to win with a second contest?
It's the gateway email.
That's right. And so, again, the marketer in me came out, and I recognized that if they sent this email again, if they were trying to get me to enter again, then they saw value in that program. They saw that they got email addresses, they saw that they got donations. It's worth offering another night of Hillary's when she could otherwise be out speaking to high-level donors. It's worth another night of hers to have dinner with a fan in exchange for the value that they were getting. And so I walked over, when I got that email, to Michael's desk, and we started talking about it, because we realized it's July, we're early enough in the primary season to capture the whole breadth of the primary and general election. Every email, every campaign communications these candidates send out, let's start capturing them and see what we can learn about them. This is a pretty sophisticated email for July of last year. And you see that it's evolved even since then. There's some more that have come out that are pretty exciting on both sides as well. So that's what we've been doing. We set up our first email address that was set up in Pennsylvania that day, Iowa shortly after, and then the following states as well, so that we could start capturing and maybe parsing out and understanding the data behind what these candidates were doing and why they were doing it.
It was interesting to come up with all the names we were going to use. So people have asked us about the name, Data Defeats Truman. We wanted to come up, how we got it. So we were thinking about this, and Kyle and I were kind of banding back and forth about the name, and some things sounded better than others. And I remember texting to him, and not while I was driving. I say that in case my wife is listening. And somehow the name Data Defeats Truman just made sense. I'm sorry, so talking about the name, we came up with the name Data Defeats Truman. It just made sense. It was alliterative, it was short, it had some punch, it had some historical content, and I think it hit all the bases. Our concern was that we work in an agency, advertising agency, with a lot of younger people, a lot of millennials. Were they going to know who Truman was? Were they going to understand the reference? Some of them got him, some of them didn't, but we assumed that the people that would be interested in a politically based marketing podcast would probably understand the reference we were trying to make.
So since we have one more of these, I will give this to the first person who will admit they don't know what Data Defeats Truman came from. All right, come up. I saw your hand first.
Yeah, we'll get
So
it first.
for the couple who did raise their hand, Truman famously held up the Chicago Tribune after on his election night victory that had printed "Dewey defeats Truman" for the presidential election, when in fact the late results switched and Truman, of course, won because.
We'll talk to you later.
So anyway, as we started to look through the data and it started to come in, we realized we had way more than an hour's worth of information to talk about. So last month we actually started a podcast with the same name called Data Defeats Truman. It's on the iTunes store. We're going to talk about some of the things that we talk about today. We talk about in way more depth on the podcast. There's some more stuff that we will later talk about as well. I'll do another show of hands. Who here follows Jeb Bush on Snapchat? Okay, just me. So who knew that Jeb Bush had a Snapchat? Okay, a couple. So we did follow him. It was just as awkward as the rest of his campaign. And so we're working on an episode right now for the podcast about how the candidates are handling new media. Because since 2012, you've seen a lot of things pop up. You've seen Vine become way more popular, or grow and become more popular. You've seen Pinterest grow. You've seen Snapchat rise, and all the major candidates that are left have a Snapchat. What are they doing with it? Are they leaning into pop culture? Are they leaning into their specialty? What are they doing? So we've looked at that. We've been capturing. I've been screenshotting every Snapchat that comes in for every candidate every day, and so we'll talk about that on the podcast as well.
Yep. So one of the things we set out to do, we knew that this event was going to be, ostensibly 2 weeks after Super Tuesday. We wanted to see what were the findings from Super Tuesday, right? The first really big day in the campaign. And I have to say, and Cal and I, we looked at all the data. Actually, I was very disappointed by what the candidates did. I mean, these are people running for the President of the United States, or basically the most important job in the country. We saw very little segmentation. You've got emails from people all across the country, and you've got, issues in certain states or zip codes about, schools or in the environment or fracking or, legalization of this, that, the other. Those are issues that the candidates really could have, spent a little while going after, quote unquote, hitting people where they live, and they really didn't. In fact, it was actually quite striking to us. Bernie sent the same email basically to everybody, regardless of where you lived. It was basically, I thought, a chance that they did not take. You're getting all this data, and you're supposed to use it very intelligently, and I think the candidates really failed. And in addition, we really saw very little testing regarding subject line testing, content, getting creative in terms of how to get money from people, how to get engagement. So I suppose all the candidates did very poorly if we look at their interactions on Super Tuesday.
So one interesting thing we saw on Super Tuesday is in all the states that Trump did not win, Oklahoma, Texas, Minnesota, a few others, and then all of them on the Democratic side, the candidate who sent the most emails won that state. That's interesting. Don't know if that's causation or correlation, but it's true. It is an interesting thing. We set out when we did this presentation, when we did this pitch, to ask the question: could we predict the Super Tuesday results based on CRM quality? Could we look at how the candidates are marketing themselves and predict who would win in what states? The answer is not really. There are some interesting data correlations that we're able to talk about. I think as we get a little closer, and especially as the Republican field narrows, and we start to see a narrow, hopefully eventually, or especially in the general election when it's head-to-head, we'll be able to see a little bit more. Michigan, you're talking Michigan?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of the big surprises about last week was the Michigan primary that went to Bernie Sanders. I know that Nate Silver of the 538, so it was one of the most remarkable upsets he'd seen in elections. We were not surprised by this. We'll talk about this later. The tenor and the content of Bernie's emails changed completely after Super Tuesday. He went from a candidate trying to identify the issues, trying to warm up his base, to a guy that had a lot of wind behind his sails, a guy that really was confident going into Michigan. You paired that with his performance at the Flint debate, and that's a winning combination. So we were not surprised to see how he did.
So the last thing we'll talk about Super Tuesday, there's a lot of fear in general about Donald Trump. There's a great number of people in the country who don't support Trump and who are afraid of that support. There's an interesting data point we looked at is that if you look at most of the primary contests, primaries are super hard to understand. The delegate rules and how that math works out is super complex. However, there's one thing that's true is that most Republican contests are what's called closed primaries, which means you cannot vote in that primary unless you're registered as a Republican. So if we're looking at Trump's support across the board, we have to look at it in the context of the number of Republicans, not the number of Americans or Democrats or independents in that area. And so we did a little bit of math. There's 257 million American citizens who are eligible to vote, roughly. Of that, about 23% are registered Republicans, and of those, 35.4% on average support Trump as their first candidate. And so what that means, if you do that math, is that 8.05% of Americans choose Trump as their first candidate, which is pretty shocking to me, because you'd think, based on the media coverage, that it's a way higher number. You'd think, based on the way that he says it, that like 80% of Americans support him.
It's a vocal 8%.
Yes, but it's kind of shocking when you think about all the media coverage he's earned when he's only garnered 2% more support than the number of people who believe the moon landing was faked. Like it's a shocking amount of a low number of support comparatively speaking.
Great. All right. So let's get down to some brass tacks. There's the old axiom in marketing and advertising, right? How good is my advertising if nobody sees it? And this is completely scalable and relatable to email marketing. You can have the greatest creative. You can have great call to action. You can have a great list. But if nobody sees the emails you're sending out, how important is it, right? How effective is your advertising? So one of the reasons we chose Gmail for our provider was because, as you know, Gmail gives you a number of different folders. There's the primary folder, there's social, there's promotions, and then there's the dreaded spam folder. And obviously, if you're doing email marketing, you want to do whatever you can to get in that primary folder, right? For those of you who know, if you get Gmail on your phone, if you get it on your computer, you got to do a little bit of moving around to get to the other tabs. It's not a huge ask, but in any advertising, in any marketing, you want to make it as easy as possible for people to see your message. So this is what we did. This is emails that went out from January to February. Wanted to see where they ended up. Now, if you look second across, that's Hillary. Of the 55 emails that Hillary sent out, 38 of them ended up in the primary box. That's very impressive. I mean, that means that somebody that she's using really knows how to put emails in that primary tab. It's very difficult. She's sending out a huge amount of emails. She's basically requesting money, which are things that Gmail should be sniffing as a promotional type email. It fits all the criteria, yet she's getting in the primary box wildly more than anybody else. Yes, she has smart people working for her, or perhaps she put in a high-level call to some of her friends in Mountain View, California. Look, the bottom, we've got Bernie Sanders. Of the 33 emails Bernie sent out during this time period, 31 of them went to the promotions tab. That's kind of what you'd think. It's requests for money, it's coming from a large server. Gmail or the other email providers pick this up. They see lots of emails coming at the same time from an IP. Okay, it's promotions, that's where it's going to go. So look at the top, you've got Ted Cruz. Of the 78 emails that Ted Cruz, and nothing against the home state senator here, but of the 78 emails that Ted Cruz sent during this time, 22 of them went to spam. That's almost 30%. Think about this. Every email that these candidates send is a request for money. It's a request for engagement. He's basically leaving 30% of his potential donations, of his potential engagement on the table.
And that's he's raised $50 million in the campaign so far. And so if you extrapolate the same numbers that Obama got, 50% of his campaign contributions coming through email, that's $25 million. If he was making 30% more, I mean, you're talking about millions, perhaps tens of millions of dollars. It's weird to talk about like money that was never there, like lost not their revenue, but you're still talking about possibly millions of dollars that the Cruz campaign could have raised, but has not because they're not handling their email properly.
Yeah, exactly. And that tells us that someone in his campaign either doesn't know how to track this or doesn't know how to remedy it. And in the world of email marketing, going to the spam filter is not a death sentence. There are certainly things you can do to right that ship, but it tells a little bit about the campaign. Are people finding this out? Are they funneling the message to the right source?
So what would you, if you were advising the Cruz campaign, what would you say to get out of the spam box? Because that's something that I bet people in this room who send emails probably would need.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Kyle. One of the things we were thinking about is why is this happening? Right? Because Ted is basically sending out the same kinds of emails that the other candidates are. He's not sending them, in much larger quantities. My assumption he's probably sending them to lists that maybe don't want his emails. Maybe the lists aren't very clean. They've got some old emails. They've got some spam traps. They've got some recycled emails. He's probably getting a lot of complaints. So Gmail and potentially the other email providers as well are saying, okay, this is a spammed email. I'm going to put it in the spam folder. The first thing to do about this is first to identify it. There's a lot of companies that people use, and there's a lot of things that even smaller organizations that don't have the resources can do to track where their emails are going. Once you identify the problem, you can start looking into how to make better engaged content, how to clean up your list. So it's something that you can definitely do, but it's a little telling about the campaign that 30% of his emails are going to spam.
So if you ask us, we would say that authenticity is probably the word of the campaign so far, and I bet you've probably seen that as well. So far, Clinton and Rubio are really the only candidates that are left that are struggling to find that authentic space. You look at even Kasich, but Sanders and Cruz, and especially Trump, they have at the very least, an illusion of authenticity with their supporters, and they found their niche, and they built rapport with that group. But Clinton and Rubio haven't so much. So the struggle for authenticity is the subject of our first episode of the podcast. We go super in depth with it. We interviewed an author and political science professor who wrote a book about candidates on SNL and how public appearances and those kind of things affect presidential candidates. And talked even going back to the 1962 appearance of Richard Nixon on the Jack Parr show. It's really interesting to talk about authenticity in the election.
It's always an issue.
We pulled out one little microcosm of that to talk about today. And so this is a tweet that the Hillary Clinton campaign sent out in August. I'll give you a second to read it. So how does your student loan debt make you feel? Tell us in 3 emoji or less. I can tell based on the scattered chuckles in the room that you feel about the same way as the internet felt about it. And since this is the internet we're talking about, the response was swift and it was brutal. Hillary Clinton, is there a condescended to emoji? Hillary Clinton, what should I do about Iran? Give me your best Minion meme. And my favorite here, Steve Buscemi from 30 Rock. How do you do, fellow kids? Clearly wasn't a very authentic moment for the Clinton campaign. Interestingly, though, it's not actually a great representation of the candidate. Hillary immediately after that tweeted out her plan for lowering college loan debt for students. She's got a pretty comprehensive plan. You can review it. It's not a jokey plan, unlike her jokey tweet. However, that's the problem with the digitization of campaigns that we've seen, is that there's like a transitive property of inauthenticity that can get transitioned. For example, if Hillary shows up at a debate and makes a fool of herself, or if she goes on SNL and something falls flat, or she goes on an interview show and says something that's a little off color, that's on her. That's a mistake that she made that then she's going to pay the price for. However, you should try to tell Twitter that she didn't write this tweet, because it's clearly paid off for her negatively that this tweet went out under her name. So she didn't write this tweet, I would guess. We might even say she maybe didn't even approve it. She didn't sign it or anything, and I mean she's 69. I'm not sure that she's used emojis before necessarily. So the question is, why do we attribute everything that comes out into the candidate's name to the candidate, positive or negative? There's a good example on the other side of the debate stage for Bernie. When Bernie Sanders introduced his Snapchat account, this was the tweet that they sent out. What is this snapshot thing, and why do I only get 10 seconds? Which, it's great. I mean, they're acknowledging this new form of communicating with voters, and they're also being self-deprecating and self-aware. My grandmother is in her 70s, and if I installed Snapchat on her phone, this is probably what she'd say. It's very much in the realm of authentic for Bernie to respond this way. It acknowledges, hey, I'm going to reach out to you on this, but I don't really understand it. So, I want to go back for a second to talk about this. So, there's an easy lesson there for politicians, obviously. Don't be campy, don't be patronizing to your supporters. But for businesses, for nonprofits, for the kind of companies that we work with, there's another lesson. there is such a thing as trying too hard. And there is such a thing as over-catering to your audience. You have to be yourself. You have to take a hot minute and chill. Don't go after the latest fad or the latest buzzword because it's there. Be authentic to yourself.
So one of the things we wanted to track in the communication that the candidates were sending out, are there things about the campaign that they are, telling us in their emails and social media? Good, bad, or indifferent. So this is a clip right here of Jeb talking to an audience. I believe it's in New Jersey. And you see when he finishes, he says, "Please clap." And then they start clapping. So if we went back in our Wayback Machine a year ago, right? Jeb was the presumptive GOP nominee, right? He had the name, he had the pedigree, he was a governor of an important state, he had the money, he had the super PACs behind him. There weren't really any Republicans in the field that people thought would challenge him. Maybe Trump would come to the race, but he drops out pretty early. I don't think anybody really thought that Ted Cruz or Marco Rubio were going to join the crowd. Jeb looked like the guy, right? So if you look on the left here, this is an email that Jeb sent out in January, and it reads, "I'm not asking for money, just a minute of your time." Now right there, that's a bad intro. This is a guy telling us, no, I know I'm asking for money a lot, but please one more time, please give me a break, okay?
Will you take our brief 6-second 2016 election survey to share your thoughts on the challenges we face as a nation? With only 27 days to go until the first votes are cast, I need your feedback more than ever to drive our strategy in the coming weeks.
Yeah, now think about that. This is an email that the presumptive GOP nominee is sending out 3 weeks before Iowa, not in August, not in October, a very crucial time of that campaign. And he basically says, I need you to help me determine my strategy. He's got all kinds of potential, information from the Republicans. He's got all kinds of polls and things that he could have reached out to, and yet he's reaching out to his email base to ask this question. It's obvious that he doesn't have a strategy. He's basically saying, what should I run on to get your support?
Well, and Jeb is one of those candidates who struggle with authenticity the same way that Clinton does sometimes and that Rubio does sometimes. So to hear him basically say, what do I have to say to you to vote for me? Like, it's how that feels to us.
Yeah, it's a terrible ploy. I mean, not surprisingly, a couple weeks after this email was sent, Jeb dropped out of the race with not really a bang, but a couple whimpers. So looking at the different trajectory that a couple candidates are taking, let's look at Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders' pre-Iowa emails. Tonight's debate proved we can win. A presidential campaign is about the issues. My daughter asked about her college savings account, how we care for our veterans. He's trying to find out what the issues are. He's positioning himself as a candidate that cares about these issues, right? On the run-up to Iowa, he gets a little bit of wind in his sails. Some of the polls are being strong for him, so he writes out, friend, Iowa is within reach. Clinton, 48%, Sanders, 45% in Iowa. He's becoming the little train that could. Hey, guess what, guys? I'm electable. I'm not this fringe candidate that Larry David's impersonating. I'm a guy that can win this election, and you should put your trust in me. Post-Iowa, tonight, we accomplished the impossible. We sent a profound message last night. He starts to get more, as we should say, or as he might say, chutzpah, right? In the run-up to Super Tuesday, we just won New Hampshire. We're going to need a bigger goal. That is my single favorite subject line that has been sent in an email. I'm assuming one of the people is a big fan of Jaws and stole that line. I was hoping there would be an image of Bernie's head feeding, Hillary the shark, but apparently not. The wind is at our backs. Enough delegates to win the nomination. He goes from this small state guy who people think is too liberal, he's a socialist, to a guy that's telling you, we can do this, we're going to win, come with me for the ride. Now, let's look at the complete opposite from Hillary. Hillary sends out emails. Hold on, let me go over that. Sure. Before Iowa, she's in a very comfortable place. Join Hillary and President Bill Clinton for a caucus night party in Des Moines. Sign up to volunteer and win. 4 days, Iowa, ready to volunteer? I'd like you to join me in Des Moines on Saturday. Join Hillary in Des Moines. Okay, Iowa, it's game time. These are very positive, pleasant types of subject lines. It's almost as though she's inviting the citizens of Iowa to, play tennis with her or to join her for lemonade or something like that. So what happens? She gets a little bit of a shock in Iowa with Bernie's performance, and all of a sudden, there's a 180-degree turn in the tone of her emails. Here's some of the subject lines. Outspent 3-1 again. We have our work cut out for us. Bernie raised $6 million yesterday. No intention of losing. Outraised and outspent. Bernie's team outraised us. Bernie raised $20 million in just 1 month. It seems overnight she goes to a more, fear or more scare-based tactics, and this is kind of strange given the tenor of the emails that had come before this. And one thing that we were looking for was maybe any kind of subject line testing, maybe a decision
or something that informed the campaign, okay, folks, it's time to go scary, it's time to go fear. We didn't really see any of that. And on the larger subject, we didn't see much subject line testing at all. So, maybe not enough of a test pattern to determine that they were going to use that tactic. But, this kind of thing does not, at least to us, does not inspire confidence in her voters. It seems as though she's on her heels and she's telling you about it.
So let's talk about the gentleman in the white hat here. For those who can't see, it says if you don't move, the voters can't see you. Tonal shifts are one thing, but email volume is another. So Mr. We're going to win so much, we're going to get tired of winning himself is sending basically no emails compared to the rest of the field, which is really interesting. There's a couple reasons that makes sense to us. The first one is he is currently in the lead. And why talk about policies if you don't have to? If you can just fly at 30,000 feet and say what you want and win states and win delegates without going into the details of your policy. On the other side of that same coin is Bernie Sanders, who, if he hadn't gone into all the details of his financial plan and how he felt about economic inequality and all of that, he would have died on the vine as a candidate. So Bernie had to speak out about the issues that he cares about. Trump seems to not have to and not want to. The second reason is he's a master of the media. Email, and especially email, is a domain that you completely control. If you're sending out, you control the message, you control the narrative. You're speaking to your audience who may or may not have seen the news. You can speak to them the way you want. Trump is a master of the media, so he doesn't have to. He controls the media narrative. In fact, we looked at 257 emails that went out around Super Tuesday to all of our various different accounts.
Not from Trump.
Not from Trump, from all the other candidates. And those emails mentioned Trump 412 times, more than the number of emails that were sent. So Trump's not only controlling the media narrative, he's controlling the entire campaign narrative. He's controlling everything that the other candidates are emailing about, not just his own. So he doesn't have to email. And the third reason is that email is typically a little more long form. You see like the format of like a little soft opening, and here's the details of what I want to say to you. Here's a link to donate. Here's one more little call to donate. Here's maybe a quote from a supporter who has a 9-year-old girl who's so happy that whoever is running, please donate again. It's a very long form, comparatively speaking, to the rest of the campaign communications. And Trump just really doesn't work in long form written like that. He's much more bombastic. He's much more quick and say things that he can then later apologize for and say, oh, I only have 140 characters, I couldn't explain the whole thing. So email he can't get away with, so he probably doesn't use it as much. But let's look at the difference for a second. So these are all the candidates, number of emails that they've sent in total leading up to Super Tuesday to all of our accounts. And if you look at that, he's sent a little more than a third the number of emails that Clinton, Cruz, or Sanders has sent. O'Malley, who dropped out a month ago, has still sent more emails than Trump has up to now. The only candidate who's sent less emails is Kasich, and Kasich is running basically a single state platform to win Ohio and block Trump from winning winning enough delegates. So Trump is finishing in first without even playing the game that the rest of the candidates are playing. So the question is there a business lesson here? I'm not going to tell you to send less emails, but I think what I will tell you is that if you're about the business of your business, then email is just icing on the cake. In a campaign context, email is not going to destroy or save a campaign unless it's talking about emails and FBI, and that's a whole other issue, and maybe not, who knows, whatever. But the emails you send are not going to save your campaign or kill it for you. And likewise with your business or your nonprofit or whatever business you're in, your emails are not going to save you and they're not going to kill you. But if you're being about the business of what you're doing, then you'll see the email will pay off for you more strongly.
And another thing about Trump's emails is that the emails he sent are basically invites. They're not anything about policy. They're just come to an event, here's the time to vote. He sent out an email, I think, before Super Tuesday. It was basically, here's where you can vote in your state. But when he sends it, it's nothing about here's where I stand on a platform. He's not using it to raise money. So even the ones he sent out are very basic.
They're trying to get you to come to his stump speech, come to his rallies. So next is a little side note about the junior senator from Vermont. Bernie Sanders has an amazing ability to stay on message. Nobody can knock this guy off message, and it works to his advantage sometimes and to his disadvantage sometimes. It's worked to his advantage because a lot of people hadn't heard of Bernie early in the campaign, and the fact that he's still saying now what he was saying six months ago, that he hasn't shifted message, means that people who are hearing about him for the first time are still hearing the core thing that he wants to be about. It also works to his disadvantage. So we're from Baltimore, and shortly after the Baltimore riots related to Freddie Gray's death, Bernie Sanders came through town, and he went to West Baltimore and talked with community leaders in the neighborhood that Freddie Gray was arrested in. And he was asked a question about racial injustice, and he answered with an answer about income inequality. That it was the same answer you'd heard from him before. Since then, he has learned how to pivot. He truly does believe that every issue that majorly faces our nation kind of ladders back up to income inequality, and he's figured out how to climb that ladder. He's figured out how to take the issue that you're talking about, talk about the issue, and then lead it back to where he wants to lead it. But it almost doomed his campaign. So what can a business learn from that? Have a point of view. Use it. Cast everything you say through the vision of what you believe and who you are and the things that you want to say. Because if you don't remain consistent, if you seem scattered, you'll be scattered to your customers as well.
Yep. The other thing about Bernie's emails is that they basically are exactly the same. He begins every email with, "Dear sisters and brothers."
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes he does the great subject line testing of saying, "Dear brothers and sisters." He always closes, even his campaign manager, who sends out some of the emails on Bernie's behalf, the closing is always in solidarity, right? And like I said, he sent out the same message to people regardless of state. There's the opening, he generally hits the points of, Hillary is in the pocket of big money and corporations. I'm the only candidate that can get us out of this. He's hitting that message, and obviously, it might not work for everybody, but it's working for him, and we're seeing the tide turning. So, next thing we wanted to talk about is basically kind of the Bernie and Hillary email loyalty program, right? We were curious, were there things that Hillary and Bernie were saying in their emails that they weren't saying at the debates?
This side-eye might be my favorite thing in the entire election so far, by the way.
Exactly. Or things they weren't saying, in press conferences or whatever. We decided to look for Bernie and Hillary because I was a little scared to see if there were things in the Republican emails that they weren't saying in the debates. I mean, after talking about Trump's anatomy and Little Marco, I can't imagine that there were things they would have said in the emails that they didn't say at the debate.
So I took a transcript of the Wisconsin debate that was held on February 11th. Now, the past couple debates between Hillary and Senator Sanders, we've seen a little bit more, vitriol. Maybe they're coming at each other a little bit more. But a month ago, this really wasn't the case. And here are some quotes from that debate. I completely agree with Senator Sanders. Nothing that Hillary said do I disagree with. Let me concur with the secretary. I think, again, both of us share the goal. It's difficult in any way to argue with a goal that we both share. We both agree. So I'm proud of Senator Sanders. I certainly agree for all the reasons Senator Sanders said. It sounds like this is dialogue pulled directly from, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or something like that, almost as if they're running, on the same ticket and they're just trying to praise each other. But in the emails that they've been sending out since Iowa, here are some of the quotes. I think he's dead wrong, and more than a little insulting about Hillary's strength and character. Our opponent will continue to mischaracterize and disparage our team. We're going to have to stand together against the influence of Hillary Clinton. They are throwing stones. Senator Sanders is running a campaign based largely on a single issue, but I don't think we're a single issue country. The Clinton establishment and its super PACs are going to throw everything they have. It's going to be ugly. So in comparing what they're saying in front of each other, or what they're saying to a larger audience, and what they're saying to their emails constituency, I think two things are happening here. I think the first one is that they're determining what kind of language they should be using in debates. I think they're getting a little bit more venom, and they're seeing, do these work? Do these emails have increasing, open rates, click rates, and maybe this helps to inform the kind of content they can use in upcoming debates and upcoming press conferences. I think the other thing is that it's almost like they're trotting out, a Hillary or Bernie loyalty club, where if they're saying the same things in the emails that they're saying in the debates, why are you going to open the emails? It's the same stuff you hear every couple of weeks. It's the same things they say online or in press conferences. But if they're giving you a little bit more insight, a little bit more transparency, something you can run with. Hey, Mom, look what Hillary just said, or hey, guys, look what Bernie's saying. It is a sense of fostering a certain kind of relationship, a certain kind of closeness that you're getting a little bit more, and it maybe justifies why you're receiving their emails.
So I'm going to talk about Trump one more time for what that's worth. Something is crazy with this man on Twitter. He has about 6 million Twitter followers, for those who don't know, compared to Hillary's 5 million, and the rest of the candidates are down near 1 million or a little bit less. But Mother Jones did an investigation that hasn't been talked about a lot. Based on the method that the tweets were sent by, only 3% of Donald Trump's tweets were most likely sent by him. The other 97% were sent by his campaign or campaign managers. It's not to say he didn't write every one of those tweets necessarily, but he definitely didn't send them or schedule them. And some of them, certainly, he didn't write. So there's a little bit more strategy to the Trump campaign than we probably would like to believe looking at his Twitter account, which is a strange thing to consider. The question that that I was wondering is, you look at these screenshots, they're all actual retweet numbers from Trump's tweets. So 5,200, there's one with 9,100, 6,900. Hillary's got only 20% less subscribers or less followers on Twitter, and she's getting 200 to 500 retweets. Bernie, who, quote unquote, millennials, young people tend to like strongly, he's getting only 500 to 1,000 with a couple occasional outliers of 2,200, 2,400, 3,000 retweets. So why is it that Trump gets so many retweets? Of course, part of it can be explained by the fact that people on both sides of the aisle retweet Trump, either to support him or to make fun of him. But that doesn't explain the whole thing. I think a large part of it is that Trump understands his audience. He knows who he's speaking to. It's why his rallies work. It's why his tweets work. So the question is, if in what you're doing, whether it's social or whether it's email or whatever kind of communications you're doing, know your audience. If you don't know your audience now, do your research, get to know your audience, learn what you need to know to get to know them and to understand them. In our experience with doing marketing for businesses at Auxilia, I've never met a company that had high turnover with customers or got stuck into a discounting mindset or whatever who didn't have a misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding of their customer. And likewise, I've never seen a business that truly understands their customer and what motivates them and struggles with those same things. And so there's a big opportunity there to learn a little bit more about your base, a little bit more about the people that support you and that are your customers, and to speak to them in a strong way.
Yep. Kyle joked, so Kyle mentioned earlier that Trump is controlling the narrative, not just for his campaign, but for the others as well. And in a sense, it's almost like he's controlling the presentation. We've talked a lot about what he's doing. And this is such an interesting campaign to track email, because you have the candidate that's getting the most airtime, right, the most attention, leading the Republican field, not sending out any emails, sending out 6% of the total emails, where Hillary and Rubio and Bernie Sanders are 15, 16%. I'm assuming that there is a playbook that candidates use and that organizations have for running a campaign using email. Here's how you get your lists. You send out requests for dinner. Here's how frequently you should email. Here's a platform you should use. How you request money. And Trump is doing none of that. I mean, this is a classic outlier case of the fact that he's doing this, despite the fact that he's not sending emails out and he's not raising money. I mean, this is going to be a fascinating study about what he did, when the election is all done and over, what he did and how he basically did not use one of the key platforms and yet potentially might have won the nomination of one of the parties.
So our hypothesis again was what candidates say matters, and the question was how much. And I think we were able to tell through the data that yes, it does matter, but we realized that what matters more is being heard. And it may be unfortunate in our political system that being heard matters more than saying the things that matter. But I bet you there's a ton of dropped out candidates who would tell you the same thing, that are saying things that matter, believe that they're speaking the truth about what our economy, what the American people need, and yet are getting pushed out because they're not being heard. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.